I said I would, now I'm gonna. I said I'd make a video on the lack of content, or the cadence of content for 5th edition. And here's what you might not expect. I think it's really good for the game. In a bad way, you know? So here's the thing. It's good for the game as a business entity. It is not great for the people who play the game. And here's what I'm talking about. In the 10 years that 5th edition has been out, there has been less content than 1 year of what was coming out during 4th edition. Was 4th edition putting out too many books? Yeah, probably. Yeah, it probably was. I think that was probably too many books. I don't know that I would necessarily be keeping up on it in the same way that I was back then. So it's been like they've really throttled down the number of books that are put out. And here's why I think they're doing it, and why I think this is actually a really good strategy from Wizards of the Coast's perspective. What do they want? They want customers. They want people to buy the books. They want people to get into the game. They want the game to stay approachable. 5th edition is the most approachable edition of any D&D edition that has ever been. More so than 4th, more so than 3rd, more so than anything before. Why? Because it's everywhere. It's everywhere. And the marketing is so out there and in people's minds. You don't have to play tabletop RPGs to know what D&D is. And this has nothing to do with the game itself. Mechanically, this is not something in favor of 5th edition. I've talked about this before, where the advantage of 5th edition is basically that it's everywhere. That is a real advantage, and that is a real selling point. That it's everyone plays D&D, so if you want to get a group together, if you want to be able to find people to play with, 5th edition is a very reliable system to make that happen. So it's everywhere. It's approachable. Why is it approachable? Because all you need is a player's handbook. That's all you need. Or a starter set or something like that. You know, basically one purchase to get into it. And if you want to get in a little bit further, pick up Xanathar's Guide or Tasha's. And that's pretty much it. If you're running a game, maybe the DMG, maybe the Monster Manual, that's standard. Do you need any of the adventure books? Any of the setting books? No, not really. Not unless you're going to run that adventure or run in that setting. And actually, now that I think about it, yeah, there are a few setting books. Yeah, I would consider things like Planescape, Spelljammer. These are setting books, really. It's kind of weird because they are Forgotten Realms adjacent, but they're also setting books in their own right because they don't really take place on Forgotten Realms proper. So anyways, you don't need to buy all that other stuff. That's all like what I would call second level accessory. Like, they are very specific niche products. They do have the occasional feat or spell or something that somebody might want to use, but for the most part, you just need the player's handbook and the other two core books, Tasha's and Xanathar's. And even Tasha's and Xanathar's, like Tasha's, I think has mostly been sort of left behind. I don't think a lot of people really recommend picking that one up. Xanathar's Guide is sort of the mid-edition bump of like, here's some rules updates, here's some content, that kind of thing. Now, personally, since I'm an opinion channel, I'm going to give my opinion on this. I don't really like the format of Xanathar's or Tasha's. This is sort of like one book every couple of years with like one new option for each class and a few new feats and some rules updates. I do not care for that. What I actually want is the kind of content that I got in 4th edition, where it is a book focused on one particular theme or group of classes or something of that sort, or, you know, a selection of new classes. And I want it dense with content. I want, if there's going to be new classes, like the Artificer is in Tasha's. Yeah, the Artificer is in Tasha's. If there's going to be new classes, give me like 5 new classes. Not one new class that has no new spells. You know, the Artificer has no unique spells to it. It's all borrowing from other people's spell lists. So anyways, that's the kind of content that I want. And so I'm not really that big on these kinds of updates. I do own Tasha's. I never really picked up Xanathars, haven't really bothered with it because by the time it came out, I was really starting to cool down on 5th edition. So anyways, these things come out periodically. So there's been basically 2 significant updates. Because aside from these books, there's mostly setting books, campaign books, and the occasional sort of weird book, like the Acquisitions Incorporated book that, man, I don't know anyone. I don't know of anyone who actually like picked that up and used it to any degree. It's very specific. Like if you're gonna run an Acquisitions Incorporated type game, you're gonna want that. So I would call that kind of a campaign book, really. The final result of this is that a new player approaching the game sees, what do I need as like core books? What are the must-haves that I need to pick up in order to be up to date on this game? Player's Handbook, which is the initial book, and maybe 2 more core books. That's an incredibly low bar to entry. Like in previous editions, that would have been like after a year, that much content, maybe less than a year. You'd have that much extra content that it's like, you really should pick these up because they have a lot of good content for you. So the game remains approachable, and that's why I think this is kind of a marketing genius idea. I don't know for sure if they did it on purpose, but I suspect they did, because if there's one thing WotC/Hasbro does well, it's marketing. Their marketing team is actually really on point. I can say nothing bad about what they're doing, other than maybe they're a little dishonest. But that's a whole other thing. I'm not going to get into that. So the reason why it's good for the game as a business item is because it stays approachable. New players know that they don't need to buy a lot of content to get in. They kind of at a perpetual ground level, you know? And the ground level has only gone up a few inches in the last 10 years. That's really good for business. That, I think, is a significant contributing factor to why 5th edition has remained as approachable as it is, and why it has remained as well-selling as it is. But here's why it's bad for the game. Because the game is incredibly stagnant. We have gotten so little new content in the last decade. We have 1 new class. 1. That's gotten out of Unearthed Arcana. The Unearthed Arcana, what is it? The Mystic was sort of scrapped because people don't like that something could almost compare to a wizard. I mean, like, it was decried as being crazy overpowered, but it's not wizard level power. Like, it's just not. So we've got 1 new class. We've gotten, maybe a half a dozen new subclasses per class. I'm not thrilled about subclasses, honestly. Subclasses do not excite me. I want new classes. I want new full character archetype options. I would like to see a fully revamped set of martial classes: fighter, rogue, barbarian, and monk. I want them all to be rewritten from the ground up. It's never going to happen. I know. But, like, what if they put out a new Book of Nine Swords? Like a new equivalent to that. Say, like, we're not going to redo those classes because reasons, like mainly political reasons, which I believe I've talked about before. But here's new classes, the Sword Sage, the Warblade, the Crusader, these kinds of things, that these new classes, so they have no baggage from previous editions, and they have a whole system of maneuvers that they can use. And they are going to be able to participate in the game at more or less the same level as like a lower end full caster. That would be amazing. As much as I say that I'm not going to buy any more 5th edition products, if they came out with that product as described, I would buy it. Just on principle. Maybe I'll never use it, but I will buy it. In order to show support for that kind of direction of game design and supporting the martial fantasy. So anyways, I don't know that I would necessarily buy it. I would definitely have to look at it first. I wouldn't buy it just based on, like, the back cover saying that's what it is. I'd have to look at it first. But basically, like, if they started doing the kinds of things that I would want to see in a game, sure, yeah, I can support that. I'm not going to support them now because they're not doing that. and for other reasons. I think Wizards of the Coast / Hasbro is actually a pretty bad company in general, and I don't actually advocate supporting them financially in any way. You know, it is what it is. So anyways, that's why I think that the incredibly slow cadence of I actually fully interrupted my own point and never got back to it. So it's bad for the game because the game remains stagnant. We've gotten so little new content that the game is in more or less the same position now as it was 10 years ago, which means that people who play it regularly are kind of running out of new ideas. Like maybe there's some subclasses you haven't played. Maybe you've played every class in the game. And it's kind of the same thing over and over again, partly due to the stagnant monster design, which I've talked about before. Not stagnant, but like the boring monster design. Stagnant is the wrong word. I'm going to throw out stagnant a few more times. We're going to say stagnant over and over until it loses all meaning. But the boring monster design means that a lot of encounters are going to feel pretty samey. The quality of their adventure writing in the last few years has been pretty low, to be honest. There tends to be just like a lack of direction, honestly. But that's man, like I'm not a reviewer really, so I'm not going to get into that, but it is an issue. And that compounded with the fact that there aren't a lot of new character options to explore means that the game is not going anywhere. It's kind of spinning its wheels in the mud, and that's why they felt the need to come out with this 2024 book, the 1D&D, which I have previously described as a cash grab and sort of a waste of money. Don't do it. It's not worth your time. They don't want to come up with new content, so they're just going to like tweak and twist existing content enough so that it looks a little different and hope that you buy it again. And that's incredibly lazy, and I don't recommend financially supporting that either. So yeah, I think it's a really good play, and I think if they tuned it up like 50% more, about 50% more releases in a better system, like start with a better system. Let's do 6th edition and say that they fix all the problems. Good edition, good game. They actually get like a reasonable design going, and then they crank up the releases like 50% more than what they are now. So we get like, say, one big release, like a Tasha's or a Xanathar's, but actually dense with content every year. That, I think, would be ideal for me personally. I can make one significant RPG purchase a year. That's easy. And that would mean that it takes 10 years to get 10 books. That's still pretty like long-sighted, and I think that would work out all right. But for what it is right now, 5E doesn't have a lot of depth to it, so there's not really a lot of content to build on. So I guess that makes sense that they're not doing very much at all. So yeah, good for the game as a property, bad for the player base in general, but good for getting new players involved. So bravo, WotC, you did a good thing in a way.